Upgrades.
Welcome back to another JVS movie review. This one is brought to you from this year's Tribeca Film Festival. And here is the name of our first title we're reviewing, and that is A Strange Path. And here's a quick synopsis. David, a filmmaker, returns to Brazil for the first time in 10 years when his feature film is set to premiere at a local festival. Although he's returned for work, his thoughts increasingly turn to his father, whom he hasn't seen since he left. And this one is directed by Guto Parente, and it stars Lucas Limeira. Now, the quick thing about this film, and what threw me off and what also intrigued me about this film, is one, this is a film set during the pandemic. We haven't, even though we're just coming out of the pandemic, it feels like it was forever ago, and it kind of feels rare that you still get films based out of the pandemic. So I was very interesting to see the take here on this film based out of the pandemic, or going into the pandemic as the film does here. And we're introduced to this young filmmaker named David, who visits his home country, Brazil. And we see it set up where he's meeting with his friends on the beach. They're having an amazing day. They talk about the film that he's showing at this festival. They talk about his work, which is he's a experimental type of filmmaker where his movies have no plot. That's the way he tells his friends. His movie has no plots. It's just images of what pops into his head, and he tries to make it at least concise into a film. So that, from the jump, we're introduced to that is his way and his style of thinking. That is the way of the style of his filmmaking aspects of it. So then when we see that, and then when we get into the story, and we see him and his friend have a very deep conversation about returning to Brazil and about his father. And that conversation really sets the crux of what we get here as the film. As David tells his friend, he has not spoken to his father since he left. And it wasn't because they had a falling out, it was just that they lost touch with one another, which already seemed ominous of how that can possibly happen here in this story. But as the story progresses, we get the beginning of COVID for Brazil. And it's announced on the news that someone has died from it. And then we get everything that's happening. David is communicating with his girlfriend back home. And we see that they're at the beginning stages of what looks like it could be a lockdown. And his girlfriend is asking him to come back home instead of staying in Brazil. Here's what we see in the story, that at first it did seem like David really cared about his film shown at this festival, but it was way more as the film goes on. You understand it's that yearning to find out why he lost communication with his father. And that's where this story, to me, elevates and takes itself to a place where not only does it become intriguing, but it just becomes a experimental study of what it means to yearn for someone. Kind of way that, and I think that's possibly why they bring up at the beginning of the film, that's the work that David does, is that's what we see as the film progresses here. As we do get to see David with his father, and we see their relationship, but we notice, during the film you notice something's always off. Something is weird. Something isn't adding up in their relationship. Even as David stays with his dad and he attempts to build a bond with his father, he's kept at arm's reach while it's something mysteriously going on with his dad that he cannot explain. And that's what really makes this film super intriguing here. At times this film is extremely slow. At times you're wondering where it's going, but what keeps you intrigued is this relationship between this father and his son, and wondering what happened and how is it that the father feels still, even when they're in close quarters, so distant from his son here. But that's also the talent of the filmmaker here. He does an amazing job at turning an apartment into a complete set, where even when David goes off in the kitchen to be away from his dad, or he's sleeping on a tiny sofa, he still seems so far away from his dad. And that's a talent of a filmmaker, because they're in the same room and yet they seem so far away from one another. And it's just this ominous thing that's always present in the film that kind of makes you wonder what is going on with his dad here. Again, this is a great performance by Lucas, who plays David. He's amazing, and not just because he has my name. He's amazing in this film as David, and they do an amazing job of setting up his need, his longing for his dad. Like, you can tell this is old time. This was a kid who just wanted his father and needed an explanation on why his father cut off communication with him. And by the time we get to the third act of this film, where we see it's increasingly obvious that something is going on here, we get a doozy for an ending in this film that I think no one will see coming. But when you see it, and when you realize the whole crux of the film, you'll fully understand how everything perfectly takes place with this film. Now, again, for a film to open up a film festival for us, like A Strange Path did, this is going to be a film that, for this genre, this narrative feature genre of experimental type thriller, in a way it feels like, it's going to be hard to match because, again, it's directed so well. It's written well because the plot always keeps you intrigued here. It's always little things that David is going through that seems like obstacles that's keeping him away from the truth, away from finding out anything else he needs to find out about his father. It works perfectly, but they're so minuscule at times when it happens, you don't put two and two together. We get even David's wife over the phone as she is longing for him to get this relationship with his father, and we see how much it weighs on her that he doesn't have that relationship, and her yearning for him to get that relationship. It all works in wonders here, without ever fully explaining exactly why they separated. All we knew is that some way, somehow, communication was lost. Once that communication is lost, as an audience, you go along with the ride of attempting to figure out this dynamic. Why does the father treat his son like he's an outsider? Why is he always keeping him at arm's distance? Like the dad is constantly working on a project that is never explained what that project was that he is working on here. And it's hilarious because it literally is a barrier between them two. In this small apartment is his work. And once in a while, he will cut off that communication. And he will cut off the work and have a communication with his son. And in those moments, at times they become touching, at times they become volatile, at times it just becoming so disconcerting the way the father proceeds with his child. It all makes for an amazing story, and there was no way I would have thought, again, this film was able to wrap up the third act the way they did, and for me to be fully satisfied. This movie fully satisfies you because it rewards any audience member who sticks out for the entirety of this film. While this is not a long film, it is a slow burn of a film. And normally for slow burns, you need a payoff at the end to make it feel worth it. This film is one of the few I've seen of recent memory of slow burns that fully pays off at the end, and I think people will thoroughly enjoy when you catch it. So, A Strange Path, again, brought to you from the Tribeca Film Festival. Out of a possible 10, I'm going to give A Strange Path an 8 out of 10. Again, it does everything you possibly could want in this type of film. And with great performances, great direction, and an amazing setup. The third act blew me away to the extent that I was left wondering what the heck did I just watch here. But yet and still, everything made sense when you go back and view it again, or when you go back and put the pieces of the film together. It's kind of obvious that the ending that you get to, but you'll never see it coming, and that is something so rewarding that you don't get. But here we get it in this amazing film by this amazing Brazilian filmmaker. So again, check it out whenever you can. Tribeca online is going now, so if you want to check it out there, you can check it out there, or you can check it out whenever this film gets distribution locally for everyone to see it. This has been another JVS movie review. Peace, people.